Good evening and welcome to the April 3rd, 2024 meeting of the Lower Merion Board of Commissioners. We have three meetings this evening. We have a Finance Committee meeting, a special Board of Commissioners meeting, and a workshop where the Board of Commissioners will discuss priorities for the coming year. Before we start, please silence your cell phones. There is amplifying equipment that's available for those who are having difficulty hearing during the meeting. That's up here at the front, or if your hearing aids are equipped with telecoil technology, this room is equipped that way as well. Later in the meeting, when the floor is open for public comment, comment will first be taken by those present in the room, and then we will turn to people who are attending virtually, and we ask that you introduce yourself and state generally where in the township you live before starting your comments. So with that, we start with the first committee meeting for this evening. That's the Finance Committee. I recognize its chair, Commissioner Zell.
Thank you, President Sinai. Tonight, there is but one item on the Finance Committee agenda. That's for us to consider awarding a contract, a large contract for milling and paving. And I'm going to call on our Chief Financial Officer, Eric Traub, and it will not be calling on him for the last time, but the second to last time. We'll have another opportunity to call on Eric next Wednesday, but that will be our last time to do so. Eric, can you tell us about this?
Yeah, so this is one of the largest annual contracts that the board issues each year. We had 5 bidders this year, which I think is the most I can recall, at least in my tenure with the township, for this contract. The unit price is positive. The total price is just a little bit above what we internally expected. I think Paul had guessed $3.3 million right before we opened the bids. But when you look at the unit pricing, we have some additional data beyond the bid tab in there. You can see how it really spiked in 2022. That's when gasoline, supply chain, all of those things kind of happened, and it's gone down 8% and then 6% the last 2 years. So that's positive, although it's still 32.5% higher than the 2021 unit price. So definitely still feeling the impact of inflation and additional cost of material. The vendor, the low bid vendor, is the same vendor as last year that won this paving bid. Did a nice job last year, cooperated well with staff, so we're happy to see them be the low bidder again. From a budgetary perspective, so there's $1.5 million in the capital projects fund that is budgeted. There's another $1 million from liquid fuels, Pennsylvania liquid fuels funding, which has to be dedicated to certain roadway expenses. And then we have utility contributions that we are expecting in the neighborhood of 1.3 to 1.4 million. So basically what happens is if even say the utility contributions end up being 1.5 million, what that will do is reduce the portion of the capital projects fund expenditures that go towards this. So the liquid fuels money is set as much as we can get, obviously, from the utility contributions for all the work that they've been doing across the township. We'll try to get that, and if that hopefully can save a few capital projects dollars, all the better. With that, I recommend moving forward, subject to any questions from the board, and then this would go on your special Board of Commissioners agenda later on this evening.
Thanks very much, Eric. So Eric, or perhaps Ernie, can tell us what the linear miles of milling and paving is projected to be and how that compares to the recent past.
I don't have that number in front of me. I can email it to you in 30 seconds once I get back to my desk, because I do have it in a in the road sheet or in the listing of roads. I know it is probably about 20 to 25% higher than last year, because we had several roads, or lots of roads last year that we had to take off the list because we thought the utilities were going to be done, but they were not done. The other thing that I would just maybe add from a scheduling perspective, typically we have started this contract kind of like right after July 4th period. We're coming to you earlier in the calendar with the expectation that we'll actually probably look to start early in June this year. Yes, that is before school ends, but given the lengthy list of roads, we feel that that's really necessary if we're going to get done by Labor Day to end of September period.
That's very helpful. There's no question that we need a lot more milling and paving. Many of our roads, including our well-traveled roads, are in rough shape. There's been a tremendous amount of utility work in the township. and we are going to be generally milling and paving curb to curb. As I understand it, particularly those roadways where there has been trenching by utilities, we use the funds that are provided by the utilities, enabling us to mill and pave curb to curb because the utilities are only obligated to mill and pave the disturbed area. And so this, the end result is much better for our township. The process takes longer because we only mill and pave, as Eric just said, in the summertime. I'm glad we're going to be able to start in June because typically it is July and sometimes late July. So June start, finish by Labor Day is a great plan and schedule. This community is, I would imagine the complaints I get are similar to the complaints that all of us up here get about the condition of our roads. And so this is very much needed. And this is, as Eric said, 25% more than recent prior years and perhaps more than that. And Eric, if you can get us that later, that would be very helpful. So, do any members of the committee have any questions or comments on this item? Commissioner Bernhardt.
Yeah, thank you very much. Eric, first for a quick comment, I just also want to thank Paul McElhaney for responding quickly to some questions I had regarding the utilities that Commissioner Zeloff has summed up so very well. And then Eric, I just want to make sure you know I am showing up at Whippany Township from time to time to ask you to explain the discrepancy between the high bidder and the low bidder. But I'll spare you now.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Other insightful comments or questions from members of the committee? Do any members of the public in the room have any questions or comments? Jody, do we have anybody online who has questions or comments?
Yes, I have Ethan Frank, and I'll promote him to a panelist.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm Ethan, 18-year resident of Marion Station. Just had my 6-month anniversary of moving to Cambridge, Massachusetts. I had a quick question, which was partially answered, so I'll just slightly change my question. You mentioned a road list. I'm curious if that's online or if somewhere I could access it, because I want to look at these roads and see if there's any pedestrianization upgrades that could be combined with the resurfacing, because as you know, when you're already doing construction on a road, it's much more efficient, cost effective. For example, if there's any 4-lane roads that are getting remilling, you should definitely look closely at those to see if any are good candidates for a road diet, if any aren't good candidates for a road diet, because when you're already doing the repaving, the cost of about $100,000 per mile goes down to $50,000 per mile. So yeah, is that available online somewhere, that list of roads? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Ernie, would you like to respond to the question that was asked by Mr. Frank?
The list of roads is attached to the Public Works agenda that was presented to this board at the March meeting?
I think it was the March meeting.
The March meeting, so that list is posted and is available.
It was the February meeting. I'm just
February
looking
meeting.
up on the computer right here. So if you look at the February 7th agenda, you'll see the presentation of the paving program, and it's 4 pages of listings of roads.
Jody, since commissioners get asked about road paving a lot, is that a list that you can provide to all of us or direct us to
Sure.
easily find it?
Yep.
Appreciate that. I guess I would, my guess is to the other question that was asked. When we mill and pave, my guess is we mill and pave existing roadways. Changing existing roadways is not done on the fly. It is a significant engineering process that doesn't get done in the next few months. And so whether it's sidewalks, which we'll be talking about later this evening, or other road changes, they are a time-consuming process because of the public nature of the asset and the way we do things. Seeing no other questions or comments from the public and seeing that that this is a very important project or contract that's before us, I'll move that the Finance Committee recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval to award a contract for milling and paving of various township streets to General Asphalt Paving Company in accordance with bids received on Thursday, March 14th, 2024, with the recommendation of the Chief Financial Officer and the approval of the Director of Public Works in the total bid amount of $3,597,976.47. Do I have a second from Commissioner Bernheim? I do. A motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. Are there any opposed? Are there any abstentions? Madam Secretary, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Ernie. And President Sinai, that concludes the business of the Finance Committee for this evening.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Zelloff. So we're going to turn to the Special Board of Commissioners meeting. Before we do, just something I should have said at the top, we do have the workshop for the priorities meeting at the end. The agenda for that workshop, for the board priorities meeting, says that there's public comment in there. That's not actually correct. If anyone's here to make public comment at that point, we're just having a presentation and a bit of a discussion from the board. We're not deciding anything tonight. Workshops like that don't have public comment. You're welcome to reach out to commissioners afterwards. There's going to be a lot of time between when we talk about tonight and when we sort of like set our priorities. Okay, so with that preview, we're going to turn to the Special Board of Commissioners. So will the April 3rd, 2024 special meeting of the Board of Commissioners of the Township of Lower Merion please come to order and all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Courtney and Mr. Stevenson have asked to be excused. Mr. Bernheim.
Present.
Mr. Churchill.
Here.
Ms. Epstein. Present. Mr. Gavin.
Present.
Mr. Grimes. Here. Ms. S. Kramer.
Here.
Ms. G. Kramer.
Here.
Dr. Rossman.
Here.
Mr. Whalen.
Here.
Mr. Woodring.
Here.
Mr. Zelloff.
Here.
Mr. Sinai.
Here.
Mr. President, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. So, once again this week, there's been a troubling incident in Lower Merion. And I'd like to turn to my colleague, Commissioner Andy Gavin, to say a few words on behalf of the board.
Thank you, President Sinai. As President Sinai said, sadly, once again, we have to address a horrific act of bigotry in our township. This time, a swastika was painted on a banner at Temple Beth Hillel Bethel in Wynwood, which was discovered on Sunday morning. This was particularly striking to me, not only because I am a member of Temple Beth Hillel Bethel, but it came mere hours after I had finished rereading Elie Wiesel's Night and actually was sitting down with my 3 daughters to share the writings and pictures of my grandparents who were Holocaust survivors. To be abundantly clear, not only is vandalism of private property illegal, but this particular symbol has no business in our township, in our county, in our state, in our country, in the world. It's not a symbol of protest or disagreement with a policy. It's not meant to create a dialogue between people with opposing viewpoints. It is a symbol of hatred and ignorance and anti-Semitism. It's intended to scare people. It's intended to intimidate. It's intended to make members of our community feel like outsiders. To whoever committed this act or would consider committing such an act in the future, know that this will not be tolerated in Lower Merion. We are a community where we care about each other, regardless of race, religion, gender, or other differences. We are a community built on kindness, caring, and love. The result of such actions is not to divide us, but rather to bring us together. And this was on full display on Monday night at a solidarity service held at Temple Beth Hillel Bethel, which was attended by well over 1,000 members of our community, including not only members of the Beth Hillel Bethel congregation and other synagogues, but also by our Christian and Muslim neighbors and clergy. We stood as one and showed that together we will support those who are targeted. This time it was Jews, next time it may be African Americans or women or Muslims. Regardless, we will always stand as one in this community. To our Jewish neighbors, there's no doubt that this was a very scary incident. It certainly was for me. While this is just a symbol painted on a banner, we've seen that when it's met with silence, it can lead to so much more. However, I hope that, as it did for me, such fear is overtaken by the love and support of the community as a whole. We are, as I said, one in Lower Merion, and we will continue to stand together against hate, bigotry, and evil. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank our township management and police. We've seen time and time again the great work that our world-class police force has always done and always will do. So thank you to our police for everything you do to put all of our resources into investigating crimes like this in our township and to keep us safe. I and all of us on the board and in the community are forever grateful for your bravery and professionalism. I hope that we don't ever have to address such an act again, but if we do, we will continue to meet hatred with love. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Gavin. This is a section of our meeting where members of the public may address the board on any agenda items. There are two of them. There's an item referred from the Finance Committee meeting held earlier this evening about paving, as well as a bamboo amendment ordinance that's being considered for adoption. If you wish to take advantage of public comment, please come up here to this podium here and just state your name and where in the township you live prior to addressing the board. Seeing no one in the room, Madam Secretary, do we have anyone online?
No one has their hand raised online.
Okay. Then we will skip the part where the board responds to public comment and move directly to the Finance Committee. And just a little note about why we are doing this back-to-back, having a committee meeting and going directly to the Board of Commissioners, and that is to get the contract for milling and paving approved early, so we can get going on milling and paving, rather than waiting several weeks before doing that. So we're just going to do it all tonight. So I'm going to move that we award a contract for milling and paving of various township streets to the following bidder in accordance with bids received on Thursday, March 14th, 2024 at 11 a.m. prevailing time, and the recommendation of the Finance Committee earlier, the General Asphalt Paving Company for a total bid of $3,597,976.47. Do you have a second? Thank you, Vice President Kramer. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Abstentions? Madam Secretary, that carries unanimously.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is the adoption of ordinance Chapter 59, Brush, Grass, and Weeds, Bamboo Amendments. So I am going to move that we adopt ordinance number 4288, which is an ordinance to amend the Code of the Township of Lower Merion, Chapter 59, Brush, Grass, and Weeds, by amending the qualified bamboo exemption, revising a property owner's abatement responsibilities, establishing a new appeals process and conditions for defense to a violation, requiring the installation of a bamboo barrier at least 20 feet away from a property line only when feasible, and removing duplicative language. Now, this ordinance was authorized for advertisement at a stated meeting of the Board of Commissioners held March 20th, 2024, and duly advertised in March 25th, 2024 edition of the Times Herald. Any questions for staff or comments from members of the board? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, maybe roll call vote.
For the adoption of ordinance
Sorry,
14...
hang on, I need a second, don't I?
Oh,
yes.
yes.
Thank you, Vice President Kramer.
Thank you.
Okay, now you can. Okay.
For the adoption of ordinance 4288, Mr. Bernheim.
Aye.
Mr. Churchill.
Yes.
Ms. Epstein.
Yes.
Mr. Gavin.
Aye.
Mr. Grimes.
Yes.
Ms. S. Kramer.
Yes.
Ms. G. Kramer.
Yes.
Dr. Rossman.
Aye.
Mr. Whalen.
Yes.
Mr. Woodring.
Yes.
Mr. Zella.
Aye.
Mr. Sinai.
Yes.
The ordinance is duly adopted.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. So that concludes the special meeting of the Board of Commissioners. So that meeting is now adjourned. And the last item on our agenda for this evening is a Board of Commissioners workshop to discuss board priorities. And I'm going to try and zoom in here at the same time that I'm talking to you. Okay, so before we get started, just a couple of notes about this. So this is a board priority discussion workshop. I don't want to say it's a priority setting workshop because we're not setting any priorities tonight. This is the third time we've done this. We do it every year, and the idea is the following, which is that we have discovered that over time we need to focus our energy over the course of the year to developing potential policies, legislation, whatever, for the board to adopt. And we found that an effective way to do it is to, as a group, talk about what it is that we would like to work on over the course of the year and what we think is important as a group. So when the policies that get brought forward after being worked on, everyone's already on board saying, yes, this is something that we've decided is valuable to consider. Okay? So nothing tonight is, here's a policy that we think we should adopt. That's not what we're doing. Nothing tonight is, here is like something we are saying now we're going to do. We're not saying that either. What we're going to do tonight is discuss what are the things that we should allocate the limited time and attention of our township staff and the Board of Commissioners to working on, so we can bring things forward for a public discussion and vote later when it's been fully developed, right? So this is a meeting that sort of like focuses us and helps us be efficient. There aren't going to be any votes or decisions on policy tonight. There's not going to be even a vote or decision on priorities tonight. Okay? That's going to come later. So what are we going to do tonight? Well, the chairs of the committees are going to talk about what they think the board should prioritize. So in some sense, everything you hear tonight is already a priority, and we're going to prioritize our priorities. Because in general, we can't do all of our priorities. It's an opportunity for other commissioners to ask questions or make quick constructive suggestions, so we all understand what everyone thinks is important for us to do, really to clarify things. It's also an opportunity for committee chairs to report out on how things have been going. Some priorities carry over from year to year, and we're just sort of making progress on multi-year initiatives. This is not the time for us to express our support or dislike of a proposal. That's not what we do here. We do that later. This is just a chance for people to talk about it. So what happens after this? The proposals get compiled, and then it gets circulated to this board, and we score them. And then the scores get put together and aggregated. You're welcome, the public's welcome to see the aggregated scores. But it is a opportunity for the board to sort of express collectively, where is the sense of the board for what is the important things to do. And that's just informative for township staff, it's informative for committee chairs, and it's informative for the department heads to help understand where the board thinks that they should be spending most of their time. It's not determinative. It's not something a committee chair has to do, not something township staff has to do. It's just getting a sense of where our sentiment is. So this, as I said earlier, because this is a workshop, there aren't public comments tonight. There is time between tonight and when the commissioners place their weight on what they think the township should focus on. So you're welcome to reach out to the board or to individual commissioners based off of what you hear tonight. So that's the game plan. We're going to go through committee by committee. Every year we switch orders, so we are in reverse alphabetical order this year. And it's fair to everyone except for people who have committees in the middle of the order. Okay. So, so what will happen, you'll see that there's there's differences across the committee. So some committees have sort of very, relatively amorphous sets of things they want to work on that they need to flesh out and get more detail. Some committees have more detailed, specific things that they think should be done. So you'll see a mix and a gamut tonight. So we're going to start with the Sustainability Committee. Unfortunately, its chair could not be here tonight, Commissioner Courtney. But we have one of the committee members, Commissioner Gilda Kramer, to take that role. So Commissioner Kramer.
Thank you. Jeremiah Woodring and I are going to do this jointly.
Okay, excellent.
Our Sustainability Committee has been a very active committee for the last year. There have been a number of projects that we have worked on closely with our wonderful sustainability manager, as well as the EAC. We've had weekly meetings to move projects forward and to move policies forward. So our goals for 2023 to 2024 were to have energy transition. We have acquired at this point a total of 10 EVs and have created 4 township charging stations. And we have been pursuing projects for solar panels at Penn Wynne and also Ludington Library. There's been an active community education program with sustainability ambassadors and a tour of neighborhood groups by our sustainability manager. This is ongoing, and we believe that this needs to continue because 75% of the township is residential. There's been policy work on an active transportation plan and a lot of work over the last couple of years on leaf blowers and electric lawn equipment, which we hope is coming to sort of a final resolution, and we hope will be coming before the board later this year. There's been a lot of waste minimization efforts. We have the single-use plastics ordinance that went into effect in January, and there's a community composting pilot in Ardmore right now. And in terms of natural resources, there's been a tree request form that has resulted in a large number of additional requests for township trees. So we've actually made a lot of progress in the last year on these goals. And the goals that we have in the past, as well as the goals coming up for this coming year, align very closely with the next slide, Jody, which is a list of the 10 key solutions needed to mitigate climate change, prepared by the International Panel on Climate Change. So a lot of what we have been doing feed into these very important ways of mitigating climate change. And they include shifting to electric vehicles, retrofitting and decarbonizing buildings, reducing food loss, and those are some of the types of ways in which it feeds in. And in order to do that, obviously, you have to have the community engaged in the process, because it isn't just what we can do, it's what everybody in our township needs to do. So with that, I'm going to turn over the next part of our presentation to Commissioner Woodring, who's going to talk about the proposals for 2024 to 2025.
Thank you, Commissioner Kramer. As previously mentioned, there are ongoing efforts from last year that will continue, and this includes PV placement on existing township buildings, as well as the community engagement efforts, which encompasses community members and engaging them for sustainability initiatives, as well as raising awareness through the ambassador program, live events, speaking engagements, the township newsletter, as well as Lower TV and social media, as well as rolling out annual sustainability reports. To build off of previous priorities, this committee is looking to put forward 3 additional priorities for this coming year. The first being community tree canopy. This committee would like to explore initiatives, ordinances, and policy updates to improve community-wide tree canopy, as well as explore existing software for digital inventory and maintenance tracking system for trees in township parks. The second being fleet transition. So we want to expand on our current efforts to, again, expand the fleet charging capabilities. Currently there are 4. We want to expand beyond that. In addition, that would also entail in pursuing electrical vehicle charging infrastructure for public use. Lastly, waste minimization. We would like to expand the existing community compost drop-off program, as well as initiate a pilot curbside compost program. And that will be the 3 priorities that we would be putting forward.
Okay, thank you, Commissioners Kramer and Woodring. So any clarifying questions or any comments anyone wants to make? Yeah, Commissioner Zoll.
Thanks, President Sinai. I believe at least once and probably twice we've taken tree inventories township-wide, and we have existing inventories. Is the way we did it and the way And the data we have going to, is the concept to use what we have and incorporate what we have into exploring a digital inventory and maintenance tracking system? I guess the first question, did you know that we got prior inventories of trees?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And I believe the sustainability manager is here for, just in case I miss any gaps in this. But the goal would be to utilize that data to potentially craft policy and ordinances in order to kind of expand on the existing. So we would use current data to kind of push those efforts, yes.
Great.
To perhaps go a little further, those inventories were primarily focused on street trees. And this particular item is to expand and to identify an inventory of our trees in our parks.
Great.
So
Thank
it's
you.
another step in the process.
Great. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Rizal. That's a helpful clarifying question, so we understand what is that you would be scoring. Anything else? Okay, seeing none, we'll move right along. The next committee is the Police Committee. It's chaired by Vice President Kramer.
Thank you. Our first priority is to hire a new police superintendent, as we all know. And I'm happy to report that we are, I believe, on schedule to do that in about May, if I'm not mistaken. After we bring on our new superintendent, we all on the board will be working to help that person integrate into the community, to get out to civic organizations, and to get familiar with the work of the township and the police department. After that person their work is underway, we hope to strengthen and expand the implementation of community policing as a strategy and a guiding principle of the police department, address public safety concerns through enforcement, pedestrian improvements, and traffic calming, explore new and innovative approaches in policing, and develop further priorities in cooperation with the new superintendent, which may include items such as a review of our policies and procedures, recruitment and retention strategies, the organizational structure of the police department, and disciplinary processes.
Okay. Any questions or suggestions? Okay, so seeing none, I'll add that the board also does have an ad hoc traffic calming committee. This is a committee that previously existed and led to the development of our current traffic calming policy. I believe that was chaired by Commissioner Zelov when it was done before. The board has previously discussed that it's time to revisit that. And so there's an ad hoc traffic calming committee. It's chaired by Commissioner Gavrin, but it's not doing anything at the moment because it didn't seem prudent to start investigating new traffic calming while one superintendent was retiring and we were hiring another. Right? Since traffic calming is a police thing. So after we have a new superintendent, then that committee's work will get underway, but we are waiting until that point. Okay. Yeah, Commissioner Whalen.
I would just like to request that we consider as a priority, following up on board discussion maybe about a month ago, a ad hoc subcommittee regarding parking policies.
Yes.
And coming up with kind of a general an acceptable parking policy to the whole board instead of doing things block by block, specifically around and surrounding large public uses, parks, schools, train stations, things like that, where we have previously over the past few decades, I understand, done it kind of block by block as neighbors want to address and deal with issues they're dealing with. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, so the next committee is Parks and Recreation Committee. It's chaired by Commissioner Gilda Kramer.
Thank you. Last year, the Parks and Recreation Committee identified 3 priorities. One was including water features in a playground. That's being done. Creating an accessible playground, which is being done, and modernizing and updating playgrounds. So significant progress really has been made on all three of these goals, as well as many other priorities. Our consideration of priorities for this year has really been influenced by the fact that Parks and Recreation Department has many major projects underway which are currently board priorities. And I'm going to kind of run through them and the status of them so that you'll understand that Parks and Recreation has a pretty full plate right now. The first is reconstruction and renovation of the Ardmore Avenue Community Center and Palm buildings. The design with cost estimates is going to be presented to the board at next week's Park and Recreation Committee meeting on April 10th. The second is the renovation and addition to Ashbridge House for township use and also to be the future home of the New Horizons Senior Center. The design with cost estimates were recently presented to the board, and we're anticipating colored renderings by the end of this month. The third one is the South Ardmore Playground and St. Paul's Tot Lot, which is time sensitive, not because of the ARP funding, but because of CDBG funding. And the design has been completed. The design phase has been completed with a committee of residents providing input, and the construction bid documents are currently being developed. The fourth project was, I believe also has ARP funds, is the Gladwin Playground reconstruction, and that's in the final stages of design with a committee of residents who are providing input. And the fifth one is the Norfolk Southern Tunnel and Trail Construction Project, also with ARP funds, which would open up the Connolly Tract and connect the trail to the riverfront. The contract for this project we just awarded. So those are the ARP and CDBG projects that Parks and Rec is working on right now. But there are also a number of other major projects that are in the CIP and that have already been planned and approved by this board. The first is the Kinwood Heritage Trail connection between the Kinwood Station and City Avenue along Bala Avenue. PennDOT advertised the bid package in February of this year. 2 bids were received and reviewed, and there is one bidder was identified as the low bidder. A resolution is going to be presented to this board at next week's Parks and Recreation Committee meeting for an additional grant award, which would cover the shortfall between the money that was allocated and the money that we have and the amount of the low bid. Then there's the Barmouth Trailhead Phase 1 renovation. The Atlas One engineering firm is updating construction documents for Phase 1 bidding later this year. The third other project is the Rolling Hill Master Plan. The Township Engineer's Office is working on base maps and a summary of opportunities and constraints for feedback at the next steering committee meeting, which is going to be upcoming. And then there's the Flat Rock Park Trail Phase 3, which is to continue the interior trail and connection to the dam and fish ladder. The Township Engineer's Office is working on construction documents for this project. The fifth other major project is the Short Ridge Park path connection to the Southern Bridge. And this is going to be designed and implemented this year, later in-house. The sixth project is the South Ardmore Path along Spring Avenue to complete a looping path. The design of this project is issued due to the impact on trees, and the Township Engineer's Office is working on draft construction documents for this project. At Marion Botanical Park, there is continued installation of the porous path, and that's going to be implemented in-house later this year. For Marion Gateway Park, There's pedestrian lighting of the path to the train station, and there is a draft design for solar lighting, which is currently being reviewed. There are multiple MS4 stream bank projects at West Mill Creek, Ashbridge Park. Those have both been awarded, and there's a pre-construction meeting for the West Mill Creek is this month. Their Rolling Hill one is being designed. And moving right along to our 10th other major project, in addition to the ones that are funded with ARP money and CDBG money. Skate park location and planning, and there's an ongoing evaluation of potential locations that's happening right now. The 11th one is the Youngsford Road Keneally Park multipurpose field installation. We have a preliminary design for a multipurpose field, which is going to be discussed later this year with the Parks and Recreation Committee. The 12th one is the response for a condition assessment of the Harridan House facilities. And this is also going to be coming up at next week's Finance Committee meeting. And in addition to these, now I guess that's 17 priority projects, there is a possible board consideration of lighting at Ashburn Field that would be paid for by the Lower Merion Little League. Now, at this point, I think that Donna Heller is Wonder Woman to be managing all of these major township projects. And we didn't think that it was appropriate to layer on a lot more on top of that. But
Why not?
but in discussions with Donna, we concluded that there are two things that are real priorities. And the first one is one that Donna identified as being her #1 priority. And that is changing the schedule of playground replacements from one every other year to one every year. And the reason for this is that many of the playgrounds were replaced about 25 years ago and are in serious need of replacement. Although 3 playgrounds are being renovated this year, there are still 8 others that need replacement. And on the current schedule of every other year, it would take 16 more years to complete that work. By accelerating the schedule to do 1 playground every year, that time would be cut in half to 8 years and would then put all of our playgrounds in first-class condition. And we think that this is a real priority for the township. The second priority is slightly different than what you see in writing, because we've modified a little bit of the language, but it is working with the Building and Planning Department and the community to create a feasibility study, not the master plan right away, but the feasibility study to be followed by a master plan for the Kinwood Station Park, which would then be implemented in 2025. The Building and Planning Department is currently working on a master plan for Bala Avenue, which will include a feasibility study for the Kinwood Station Park. That is a very small, about 1 acre, underutilized park right next to the Kinwood Station and right across the street, across Montgomery Avenue from Bala Avenue. The planning would be done in conjunction with efforts to revitalize Bala Avenue with the goal of creating a community gathering space and potentially an outdoor entertainment venue. Community groups are very interested in this project, including the neighborhood club and other groups, and will all be involved with this project. And this is not something that's going to take a lot of Donna's time, but would probably take more time working in conjunction and coordinating with Building and Planning, which is already starting to work on this project. So those are our 2 priorities, and I hope you'll agree that those are important.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Kramer. I think half the township staff quit when you got to like item 13. We've done enough.
I ran out of room on my paper to write down everything.
It's an impressive amount of work, and it's a testament to everything this township does. Any questions or comments for Commissioner Kramer? I have just one, and as I would encourage you to consider for the first one, having the priority for the committee to be to evaluate the scheduled playground replacement. I think what's proposed here is a conclusion. That might be the conclusion you get to at the end of the process. But I think an appropriate thing for a committee to do is sort of like investigate this and bring to the board later in the year, what a proposal would be. And so I hope you'll consider that. Anything else? Okay. So the next committee is the Library Committee. Its chair is Commissioner Churchill.
Thank you very much. I don't have 20 projects, so don't worry. I just started my presentation just in conforming with our, I'm sorry, I can't get I just wanted to say the premise of our libraries is following our strategic plan, and that's really the promoting of opportunities to connect with diverse people and ideas, protecting our collective heritage and knowledge, adapting to ever-changing needs of our community, and encouraging the lifelong love for reading. And the best thing is our libraries are still free. So that's, and I think just my many years on the board, we really love our libraries. And I think that by and large, people are happy with them. In talking with our head librarian, Lynn Williamson, the biggest challenge that the library system has is they've never really recovered from the Great Recession of 2009. But the good news is that readership and program attendance have recovered from our pandemic recovery, our pandemic, COVID pandemic, back in 2019, 2020. The biggest problem that the library systems have is they're struggling to provide the 12% funding that for purchasing library materials. And I think that really goes across the board. This board addressed that problem in our 2024 budget, and with the allocation of a full-time employee that's going to help with full-time fundraising for all our libraries. I would just single out, lastly, ongoing projects. I think the Penn Wynne Library, they have a reading garden project that is partially funded, and I hope by the end of this year that it'll be fully funded and go forward. Also at the Penn Wynne Library, the installation of solar panels has been discussed, and I think it's still in the design stage. So that's also going to be a priority with the library system. I've excluded some of the libraries. I think that the problems, concerns that they have, like Gladwin, they are in an old building, and bad things happen to old buildings, and they're addressing that. I would also mention something that I sent out in an email, I guess about 10 years ago at the Bala Library. that we put in geothermal heating and cooling, which was quite remarkable. And when they said that a number of the cells are failing, it's like, well, okay, just replace them. But they can't do that right away because the parts are no longer there. So it would just be and something that I said in my email, that especially sustainability projects, let's make sure that there are parts that will be available if something happens, rather than just be caught short, as we have been at the Battle Library. So that's the end of my presentation, and if anyone has any questions?
Commissioner Zoll.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Churchill. Just one observation. As you may know, I'm a ex officio member of the Ludington Library Board.
Yes.
And of course, we're all invited there next Tuesday morning. That's not mine.
But
That's it.
let's just hope it's not leaking.
Well, I don't
At
think
the
it will
office.
be. Ludington, I don't believe, has difficulty with the funding for new materials. And so the Ludington endowment is strong, the finances are strong, the fundraising is strong. And so I can say with confidence that it's not an issue at Ludington.
Okay.
So you did say it affected all libraries, but I don't think that's the case at Ludington.
Okay.
And I did not know that there were problems with the geothermal at Ballackinwood Library. That was a big step that we took to install
Yes.
geothermal at the time of the renovation of that library.
Yep.
So does that mean it's not being used, or it's not used as effectively as it can be? Maybe our manager can tell us 30 seconds about that.
No, it's still being used. It's just there are parts of the system that are beginning to fail, and as Commissioner Churchill said, it's hard to get parts, but you figure that project was done, what, 16 years ago?
Well, we're dating ourselves, aren't we?
I don't know if it's that
It was done before Ludington, so
No.
No, it was second.
No, it was.
Ludington went first.
Yeah.
Well, Ballackinwood went second.
then
More
call
than 10
14,
years ago.
13, 14.
Geothermal systems are built to have a long life
Yes.
because of the significant investment and the payback time. So that's a little surprising, but
It was surprising to me too, but it's just a word of warning that we're going to be doing more sustainable projects, and let's just make sure that we have the parts, the spare parts.
thank you very much, Commissioner Churchill.
Yep.
Anyone else? Okay, thanks, Commissioner Churchill. The next committee is Legal Affairs, and its chair is Commissioner Bernheim.
Thank you very much, President Sinai, and just a more general from 20,000 foot thank you for having us do this once again. It's really very helpful. And then when you're following up after parks and recreation and libraries, that's a tough act. But there's a unique aspect of that. I think it comprises about 16% of our budget normally, which says a lot for who we are as a community. So I won't go too far off on that tangent and go to legal affairs. So the Legal Affairs Committee, myself and Commissioner Gilda Kramer, Commissioner Josh Grimes, on the Legal Affairs Committee, there's a wide path of items that come through that fall under that rubric, in that so much of what we do has certain aspects which require us to consult, be it statutes and ordinances, rules, regulations, the do's and don'ts of what we can do as a municipal government. And one of the things that we find ourselves from time to time is involved in litigation. We may have to be on the plaintiff side of it by trying to enforce some of those rules and regulations, statutes, ordinances, and codes. And on other occasions, we are on the defendant side of it, where somebody is challenging some of the things that we seek to implement. And there are just, as I said, an array of areas that come across and find themselves in litigation mode. Because it's litigation and because there are occasions where as a board we need to make decisions, we are permitted under the Sunshine Act to have those discussions in executive session when we're going to contemplate what we're going to do and why we're going to do it. Those are the type of privileged communications that we have with, be it our solicitor or the other attorneys that we engage from time to time. And the committee thought that we might be able to improve some of those communications. That there are times that the board gets information in executive session, and maybe there's something as a committee we could do so that there is a little bit more runway to the decision-making process. And that's one of the things that we want to work on with our township solicitor and their office to see if we can, improve that process. Secondly, we note that, let me back up. Gil High has served as our township solicitor for a very, very long time. We have been very fortunate. He may be one of the finest, if not the finest, municipal township solicitors that exists, and I've had experience to deal with many, many others. And for good reason, he stands with a fine and excellent, reputation. And his office, is there, and they're frequently here for us from time to time with other members. But we also use other attorneys. There are occasions where there are matters which are, we have insurance which protect them. Insurance companies are able to make recommendations as to who we have to use. Sometimes there are labor-related issues, and we have attorneys that handle that. Sometimes there are police-related issues, and there are special attorneys that we have in that realm. And I make this next shared committee recommendation, not because of dissatisfaction of any of the professionals that we've hired, but we wanted to take a look at what is that process, and what do we do and how do we do it when we make those decisions of who it is that's going to represent Lower Merion. We want to make sure that we are getting, that first-rate legal counsel. So that was one of the items that we put on a to-do list, is to see, what is that process, how is it working, and what we might be able to do, if anything, to go ahead and improve it or to take a look at it. The last item that, as a committee, we would like to see improved, and this probably permeates beyond just, quote, legal affairs, is what we can do to enhance our code enforcement. We have many rules and regulations that we as a township impose after careful consideration of, ordinances that we pass or the codes that we have, be it the township code, building and planning codes, be it the municipal code. And a number of years ago, we found that there were too many repetitive situations where people would bypass those requirements, and they wouldn't ask permission on the front end, but they were coming before us seeking forgiveness on the back end. And we stated as a board, as a policy, that we were not going to make exceptions when that occurred, and if people took that as a course of action, they were then going to have to do whatever was necessary to correct any of the wrongs that were committed by not making sure that they had come to us on the front end if there were reasons for exceptions. Now, I don't know if you can connect dots and saying that there's a cause and effect, but that has happened less frequently. But what we still need to do is to get teeth into our ability to go ahead and enforce codes. And I see Ernest smiling in that. Most recently, just as an example, and I only use this as an example because it's most recently, there were a commercial establishment that had their trash pickup, and the vendor that they used was coming at very early hours. The residents in the area were being, caused to get up a whole lot earlier than they would like. It was disturbing their sleep and their peace and quiet enjoyment. There were a number of citations issued to this particular hauler, and they ignored them. It was easier, we'll pay it, we'll ignore it, whatever. And finally, the actual property owner changed vendors. So what did the new vendor do? Same thing as the old vendor. So one of the exchange of emails that Ernest and I had said, the property owner, it's their agent that is violating the code. One thing exists of telling those vendors, all right, you've lost your privilege of having a permit to do work here, and the other is making sure that those fines go after those particular property owners. I would imagine if we could, Ernest, stand up here, he could spend the next several hours with other examples. We had at one point, I believe, an ad hoc committee to work in order to see what we can do to enforce our codes better, and the committee would like to see if we can have, board officers, jumpstart that code to work with our township people to see what we can do, because I think it is, that example is for, public safety, for quiet enjoyment, and there, as I said, there are many, many of these examples, and this should be a high priority. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernheim. Any questions or suggestions? Commissioner Zeloff.
Thank you, President Sinai. I guess for Commissioner Bernheim and Ernest is in the room, is the update to the student housing code incorporated into the code enforcement priority, something that was talked about last fall and brought to the board and the staff by Commissioner Stevenson and
I don't know an answer for that. I don't know, President Simon,
Yeah,
if you want to
I
get
think,
that far into the weeds of these things at this point.
Rather than ask the question, I'll just say, I hope it is incorporated.
That is
Thank you
better
very-
put.
Thank you very much.
A lot of these are these in the to be determined
Right.
category,
Yep.
and that's the point of bringing things forward at the general stage that they are now.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you. Okay, so the next committee is intergovernmental relations, and that's Commissioner Grimes.
Thank you. Pleasure. President Sinai. So the good news about the Intergovernmental Relations Committee priorities is that they cost virtually nothing, and they probably require very little staff time. So I should quit while I'm ahead, but I'm going to go over some of these priorities. Really, the goal of intergovernmental relations is to improve communication with other governments and also coordination with other governments. And this is something that's happened in previous iterations of this committee, and certainly there are individual and groups of commissioners who have been doing this for a long time on various topics. But we're trying to institutionalize it maybe a little bit more and make some of these contacts more regular. So the first is to continue a dialogue that we've already started establishing with the Lower Merion School Board. This has started because of their decision to extend later school start times, which led to an enlargement of the walk zone for Lower Merion High School, which was done without significant input from our township traffic safety unit and also other experts on our staff. So we had reached out to the school board, and actually several commissioners had an initial meeting with representatives of the school board and the superintendent to discuss how we might be able to assist them to safely implement the enlarged walk zone. And that's something that is continuing. There are also other issues that will come up. The future use of Oakwell is something that pops into my mind. And so this is something that we hope to institutionalize. And the way we've done it at the first meeting, and I think would continue subject to input from other commissioners, is that the members of the Intergovernmental Relations Committee are sort of permanent members of this dialogue with the school board, and then other commissioners are welcome to participate as they would feel appropriate. The second is meetings with the Marworth Mayor and the Borough Council. Again, issues come up. Most particularly, there's continuing discussion of improvements on Montgomery Avenue, both in terms of stores and also in terms of traffic that involve Narberth Borough. I suggested on the memo possibly twice a year or more frequently as needed that's something that could be easily reached out to initiate those. And in the past, there's certainly, I found the borough perfectly willing to engage in those conversations. The third is meeting with the Montgomery County Commissioners. We have 2 brand-new Montgomery County Commissioners and 1 commissioner who has been there for a little more than a year, the current chairman. None of those commissioners have extensive experience with Lower Merion Township prior to becoming county commissioners. So the thought was that establishing contact and inviting them to a meeting would be beneficial, particularly once they feel comfortable after Bridge 6 has been finally opened.
Sounds like the right timing.
What's that?
Sounds like the right timing.
Right, could be very shortly, could be in a few months from what I understand, but in any event, not trying to delve into that controversy. In any event, the proposal that we suggested was subject, if we could do this in compliance with sunshine rules, inviting them to come to have an informal sort of meet and greet with commissioners and a pre-board, followed by a presentation out here if they would like to do that, which might be helpful. And I have reason to think they would be amenable to that conversation, to doing something like that with us. The last is our state legislators. We have benefited from, I think many of us have benefited in the township from very good relations with our state legislators. We work with them on funding. We work with them on legislative issues like speed cameras, which we would hope to be legalized, or at least I'm speaking for myself, but my sense is that many commissioners would like the speed cameras to be made legal in Pennsylvania. Once again, we could maybe formalize once, twice a year a meeting with our state legislators, with the board, and possibly a public presentation if they would like. So that is really it. Again, just increasing dialogue and increasing coordination is really the overall priority.
Good, thank you, Commissioner Grimes. Any suggestions or questions? Yeah, sure.
I think it sounds like a great, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're not allowed to do that.
No,
you of all people.
It sounds like a great approach. I think it sounds just smart, and I'm sure that the other parties will be willing to participate, and I imagine only good things will come out of having regular contact like that. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, let's hope so. Thank you.
So I'm going to remind people that you were going to get to rate things A, B, and C. And later, in the cover of darkness, you're welcome to give him all your A's. But let's okay, great. So thank you. So the next committee is the Health Committee, welcome back to Commissioner Rossman, who might have been away long enough that he's speaking an Australian accent now. But
thank you.
Floor is yours.
Thank you, Commissioner Sommer. This is a report that also does not require a lot of money, does not require a lot of funding, but we have a minimal investment with a maximal output. I have to thank Commissioner Epstein and Commissioner Churchill and for participating. Much of our information comes from the Health Advisory Council that we rely on, and a lot of collective thinking has developed. In response to that, we would like to continue to advertise and educate the underserved public of Lower Merion Township of the importance to take advantage of the grant-funded dental plan. We have money in the bank we're willing to spend to support and correct any dental abnormalities that exist in those people that ignored themselves throughout COVID. That's the way the grant was applied. But with the benefit of being on faculty at Albert Einstein Medical Center, we have taken many of these patients to Albert Einstein Medical Center, where there are 12 postdoctoral dentists that are coming to do a general practice residency an extra year after dental school, and they take these patients, and they've basically been donating their time and their services to produce an enormous amount of dental medicine for these patients. The problem is getting people to turn out and come forth We don't want to run out of the money and have to return it back to the state if it's possible to use it. And we're going to resubmit another request to extend it for another year. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing is CPR AED training for up to 60 residents. What's happening today is it's horrible. They're non-opioid drugs that are being mixed now with opioid drugs. Something called xylazine, which you may have read about, are tranquilizers that are available in veterinary offices and are given to horses. So I don't think it's at every veterinary hospital, but perhaps out here they may have them. If that's mixed with heroin or with any other opioid and injected, can produce an overdose. To maintain people until the police can arrive, until a Narberth ambulance can arrive, till life-saving efforts can arrive, people really have to know CPR. In addition, CPR I think is a great public service. If we can train people to take CPR and AED training, the two go hand in hand. They won't get a card, but they'll at least have the knowledge of how to perform those efforts. So today we have had 3 sold-out sessions on using Narcan. We will still bring that into that session. So if someone's overdosed, they will be given Narcan. If it's a non-opioid overdose, then you have to maintain them alive with CPR. Last thing is a senior driver education program. There's one with AARP, a smart driver course. We've had 2 deadly and unfortunate accidents involving seniors. So education and awareness for our seniors on how to drive safely is imperative for them to keep themselves and others safe. And this program called CarFit is provided by Montgomery County. The HAC would, the Health Advisory Council would provide the time and the place. And it's possible if someone pays a minimum amount, like $20 to take this course, they would get a reduction in their auto insurance. And those are our 3 things. Again, minimal input of money, maximal output of satisfaction. Thank you.
Any questions or suggestions for Commissioner Roscoe? Okay, thank you, Commissioner Roscoe.
Well, I'd like one question.
Yeah. Someone have any questions? You were so eloquent that there was nothing.
Okay, thank you.
It's the highest pinnacle that a commissioner can achieve. The next committee is the Grants and Community Development Committee, and its chair is Commissioner Epstein.
Thank you. Okay, so for grants and community development, this is federal grant money, so we're literally not thinking outside the box, but staying really, really inside the box. So not a lot of innovation or creativity. I do want to mention Emily Crane, staff member, she's fantastic and she's doing great work, staying inside that box and maximizing that money. One thing I did want to point out as a priority, we have a few here, but really increasing transparency and communication. There was an information session in January to let different organizations know about the money that was available. 3 new organizations applied, which is great. We're going to continue that next year, so to see that maybe not just on the one end of having more organizations apply, but also being more transparent and communicating where the money is going. So the community is aware of just all this really good work that's happening and that's being done. And that's about it.
All right, yeah. Thank you. Any questions or suggestions for Commissioner Epstein? I'll have one, and that is one of the things that the committee hopefully will be able to consider. There tends to be this combination of entities that have previously received funding, and then ones who have not, and then there's like this third category that may or may not exist of entities that does not know that they would be qualified for funding, right? And I think you have included this in transparency and communication outreach, but like that's a category that I wouldn't have the first idea of how to reach, but like it seems like it would be interesting,
Yeah, we'll continue. I think it's something that has to grow. A little bit's word of mouth, advertising, but just keep that ball rolling. Sure. Thanks.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else? The next committee is the Fire Committee, and I recognize its chair, Commissioner Bernheim.
Thank you very much. The Fire Committee, comprised of myself, Commissioner Zeloff, and Commissioner Woodring, Most of our interaction with fire service is through our participation of the Lower Merion Fire Department Board of Directors meetings. As the chair of the fire committee, become a member of that board, as well as our township manager and the various chiefs and the presidents of each of the respective fire companies. In 2021, we had a group from each of the fire companies meet with a consultant and set forth a strategic plan in order to take a look at how we are operating with the Lower Merion Fire Service, which has 6 separate fire companies under its umbrella, each with some of their own individuality, but we're all pretty well tethered, especially when it comes to finances, because we provide the overwhelming majority of the funds for the operation of each of the fire companies. And there were about 13 goals which were identified in this strategic plan, which each of the fire companies then agreed to adopt for themselves, as we did as a board here. And among the things that occurred where we were able to get a memorandum of understanding with each of the fire companies, which surprisingly enough did not exist before, which helps describe things from the manner in which they are organized together, even when arriving on, fire scenes, how they're going to, control things, to how they're going to operate as a Lower Merion Fire Service, yet keep that individual identity. The strategic plan has not had all aspects of it, put into place, but many of them. So there was recently a meeting with the chair of the Lower Merion Fire Department Board, Brooke McMullen, Chief Blaine Lease, Chief of the Gladwin Fire Company, Manager McNeely, and myself, to review the strategic plan and find out, all right, what aspects of this do we still need to go ahead and implement so it doesn't become something that occasionally occurs, that gets put on the shelf, it read well, but nobody implements it. There's strong desire by all of the members of the Board of Directors of the Fire Service to move forward with this. And the committee felt that we need to do what we can to make sure that that moves forward. And I think that's going to happen just by its natural course. But we'll report out on that as time goes by during the year. Another improvement that we had, which is came out of the strategic plan as well, is financial reporting. Each of the fire companies had different methodologies. Some were really fairly well-versed on how to do it. Others, it was a little bit more back-of-the-napkin type approach. And we have now, retained an appropriate accountant to try to uniform how the accounting reporting is presented to the township so that it is consistent fire company to fire company. It helps us evaluate their individual performance and where we need to go ahead and be of assistance. And one of the committee's topics is to make sure that this continues. I believe we had a new accounting firm recently retained, for that purpose. And then probably one of the more difficult but more important aspects is the recruitment and retention of our volunteer firefighters. We have career firefighters that are affiliated with each of the fire companies, but the backbone of our fire service are the volunteers that come forth. And Lower Merion is not unique in that recruiting and retaining volunteers is very, very difficult. It is not the day where everybody just lives in the community, the bell rings and you run to the local fire company. People are holding 1, 2, 3 jobs of what they're doing. It's very hard to go ahead and participate. And just to be certified at that lower class of what's referred to as Firefighter 1, it requires 180 hours of training, just that elementary class, which is a significant amount of time in order to really have anybody get on a truck and provide service. So one of the things that we have done here to help is we quickly adopted the tax credit ordinance. Most recently, the county has likewise adopted an ordinance so that firefighters that meet certain metrics get, in essence, a real estate tax rebate. They get their own money back in order to encourage people to go ahead and do this. I have stated many, many, many times that The school district, which has made a small step forward, we will help encourage them to do something, I think, which imitates exactly what the county has done, and hopefully they will do that. That will be helpful. We recently also have invested in, Union Fire Company to try to renovate its firehouse. Gladwin has put up areas so that there are people who can actually live there, and that helps get firefighters into the community to go ahead and service each of the different fire companies. We need to look in that direction. What else can we do? Where else do we want to, apply funding? Because we really would not want to incur the expense of a complete full-time fire service. It would be quite expensive. And one of the things that I've learned in serving as chair of the fire committee for the number of years I've been doing it, there is a very unique esprit de corps in each one of these firehouses that is hard to duplicate or hard to explain unless you see it. And the dedication that these people have is something that allows us to have what really is a first-rate fire service, and we need to figure out how to continue with that paradigm, and that remains a key commitment that the committee wants to make sure the board is in support of. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernheim. Any questions or suggestions? Commissioner Churchill.
Thank you. Are you still frustrated with false alarms number?
Look, that is a key thing, and for a long period of time, I would, produce the statistics that show that we're still hovering, 50+% of the alarms that go off are false alarms. And as you know, we had passed an ordinance so that the contractors that would forget to turn the alarms off and the sawdust would set them off, they could end up being fined. Homeowners, you get 3 bites of the apple before you get fined in a given year, and we're unable to change that. But we need still to do something in order to bring that down, and that is always up for whatever good suggestions somebody would have in order to do that. Interestingly, I reached out to the school district to say, you're always looking for projects for high school kids. This is a project that, be able to get and educate people of what the cost is just, on the equipment. And then you have to imagine that, 2:30 in the morning, the alarm goes off, someone's going to go, it's another false alarm, maybe I roll over or maybe I don't roll over. Human nature can take place. We have been fortunate that our fire service, they show up, but it's only a matter of time where certain people are going to get just drained from that. So, yeah, that remains with the fire company on the to-do list.
Vice President Kramer.
Thank you. So I have 2 questions about recruitment and retention, and then maybe 2 ideas, I don't know. How do people need to be in order to serve as volunteer firefighters?
I'm not sure. I think it's 18.
You can be 16
Is it 16?
and be a junior firefighter.
Yeah, but you can't get firefighter 1 status, I think, until 18. I could be mistaken about
Okay,
that.
16 or 18, okay. And do we have a sense of how many more firefighters we need? I know that can be a difficult question to
Yeah,
answer.
and I have the statistics, but not in front of me. There's turnover of what occurs, of the number of volunteers that actually show up. So sometimes they're in the books, but they're not coming, and then you can sort of weed out those who are really active volunteers. But there is a constant need in order to fulfill this, and as I said, Lower Merion's not unique. Getting volunteers now is more and more difficult.
Yeah.
So the number of volunteers that are coming forth is smaller and smaller.
Yeah. So, and then I have 2 ideas that may have already been looked at and dismissed, but with regard to recruitment and retention, looking at, talking more to high schools to solicit junior firefighters, I guess, who can then become full firefighters. And I know there are a few women firefighters in the police departments. but we're 50% of the population. So maybe there's opportunities to get more women involved. I think a lot of women don't know that they can serve as volunteer firefighters, or don't realize that they can contribute, and I wonder if there's opportunities for tapping into that half of the township.
Yeah, I don't know that anybody's looked at it, you know, male, female, it's just breathing body. So, but, you know, that's an idea to explore, sure.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Commissioner Bernheim. The next committee is the Economic Development Committee, and that's chaired by Commissioner Gavin.
Thank you, President Sinai. And before I get started on that, I believe, Vice President Kramer, you have a daughter who's close to 16. I don't know if that's really an idea. Okay, anyway, sorry. In the
And
economic...
she does watch these meetings.
Yes. For Economic Development Committee, in 2023, there was, you know, a number of goals presented. One rose to the top, which was energize our commercial areas. I think it beat out ignoring our commercial areas or some other goals that really weren't as well desired. But really the main goal was energize our commercial areas. I think everyone on this board in this township would love that. And so as we thought about a committee, what does that mean to energize our commercial areas? We wanted to get our priorities, or at least the ones that we presented for 2024, to be a little more actionable, specific, measurable, get goals in there that we could really say at the end of the year, yes, we can check these boxes and we did this and we are advancing the ball on our commercial areas. The first, I guess, piece of it was to look at which commercial areas, because we have a number of them, and the two that really kind of, again, rose to the top were Bala Kinwood and Bala Avenue and Ardmore. With Ardmore, obviously, we're working to implement the master plan right now, so that's obviously a huge focus for us. And in Bala, it clearly, as we've talked about many times, it needs a shot in the arm. There's significant engagement, excitement in that area. And Commissioner Kramer had talked about some of the activity earlier with the Parks and Rec committee. I think it was priority number 684 or something like that. But you know, there is certainly excitement and energy there. So specifically within those two commercial centers, and it's not ignoring the others, Gladwin, Bryn Mawr, the Marion Kinwood ones, which are also important, but as President Sinai said as we kicked this off was, you know, we have limited resources and we have to focus them somewhere, and the thought was for 2024, focusing in these two areas. In particular with Ardmore, finalizing the plan for Schaffel Plaza. It's something that we've had public meetings on. It's, you know, we're working on where is that balance between open space to create this vibrancy in the middle of the town versus the need for parking, and how do we balance that appropriately so that we create an area in the middle of Ardmore that's really, you know, the right spot for Ardmore. Second, talking about parking, really optimizing the parking. And it doesn't mean create more parking, find more parking. We have a lot of parking in Ardmore. Some of it may not be appropriately located or signed appropriately. So it's really figuring out, taking a plan to see what we have, an inventory, which I think we have an inventory already, and figure out how to optimize that and say, you know, let the public know we have this parking, we have these spaces. You don't necessarily need more parking, but how do we communicate it? How do we develop the signage? How do we do all of that to make sure that this parking, that a lot of the spots are currently empty and not being utilized fully, how do we make sure that we utilize it appropriately to drive traffic into Ardmore? Traffic was the wrong word. Anyway, the other area within parking is we're obviously SEPTA and Amtrak, or SEPTA is working on the train station right now. There we lost a lot of parking for that, and evaluating, do we allow, there have been some suggestions and ideas on a new parking garage associated with that train station. Does it make sense for our township to invest in that, to support that, to, you know, zone appropriately for that? Will, you know, I know with that train station, it drives, there's Amtrak trains to New York from Ardmore. If we have appropriate parking for that train station, will you get more people coming into Ardmore who then might go to dinner in Ardmore afterwards. Would that help revitalize Ardmore? So really taking a critical look at the parking for the SEPTA station and seeing what makes the most sense for that station. So that's Ardmore, and then one last piece for Ardmore is streetscaping. We've talked a lot about trees and additional trees, really revitalizing the streetscaping, making it more pedestrian friendly, more desirable to walk within Ardmore, and really enhance what's already, I don't want to say started, really been done within Ardmore to date. Over the past, I don't know, half a decade, Ardmore's really seen a revitalization and building upon that and continuing that for the future. So that's the Ardmore piece. Within Bala, it's kind of taking a step back from there and implementing some of we did a retail study, the City Avenue District Retail Plan, and implementing some of the recommendations. There's the Bala Arts District, there's City Avenue District, there's a number of organizations that are excited, that are working in that area, coordinating with them to have kind of this art-based placemaking, programming, art in the public to help revitalize that area, spur some interest within Bala Kinwood, in particular that expansion of the Kinwood Trail and that Kinwood Station to Bala Avenue, which Commissioner Kramer talked about earlier. Really using those resources and those outside organizations to build that connection and make that something that we can have that focus of the area and then build out from there. A second priority within Bala is redefining the facade grant program. We previously, years ago within this township, had a pretty robust facade grant program where the township would provide grants to kind of freshen up the storefronts. And it really, I think, was a big part of Ardmore getting that kind of kick in the pants and getting Ardmore started as it led to this vibrancy. I know our staff and Jillian Dirks in particular has worked on this facade grant program, creating the guidance. What does it look like? Where are the funding sources? What kind of amounts? What are the parameters? Is it a 50-50 match? Are we paying 100%? What does that facade grant look like? So in 2025, we can kick that program off and help give that same kind of shot of adrenaline to Bala that we did to Ardmore years ago. Third, we had a presentation, I don't know if it was a few weeks ago, a month ago, everything's blurring together these days, from the City Avenue District a few weeks ago, to develop a long-term commercial strategy for that district. They came in, we have a very good outside organization, quasi-governmental, I guess you can call it, that we're working with to help develop this area long-term. So working with them to develop this commercial strategy, to determine what kind of zoning updates we need, what kind of infill we want, and how does zoning help play a role in that. As a township, we are very limited in what we can do. We can't buy buildings and give them out. We can't do leases for people. We can't do any of that. But there are tools that we can use. And working with some of these outside organizations who can do more than we can help create this more vibrant Bala Avenue area. So those are really the focuses between Ardmore and Bala. There's one other priority, and I touched on it a little bit. Those are really specific plans, but taking a step back, being more general, we think having economic development be a driver and involved in everything we do, I think creating a framework for that is something that I think would be really important for a priority for this board. So as we move forward, not only with Bala, not only with Ardmore, but with all of our commercial areas, having that framework, understanding what our toolkit is, what outside organizations can do, determining metrics for how we prioritize in the future, creating that longer-term framework is something that we also want to have by the end of 2024 so that we can present that, and in 2025 and 2026 and moving forward, we have that framework as well. So it's those two specific areas plus that overarching framework.
Okay, thank you. Any suggestions or questions? Commissioner Zoff.
Thanks, President Sinai. So Commissioner Gavin, I'm sure you know this, but the part of the project for the new SEPTA station in Ardmore includes the foundations for the parking garage. And it includes the foundations, but not the garage, because at the time, when the funding was gathered for the new station, there wasn't enough for the parking garage, but there was enough for the foundations. And it's all part of the plan, of the parking garage and the new station, most of which is funded by PennDOT and SEPTA. And so is seeking additional outside funding, does it make sense to incorporate that into the priority? Because Amtrak will benefit, SEPTA will benefit, PennDOT saw the benefit of the new station and suggested at the time that come back, there may be funding available to finish the parking garage. Yeah. And so, as this suggests, you're suggesting a consultant to determine the economic impact, but I think there's also seeking the funding to complete the garage.
Yeah, no,
it's designed, right? The design exists, the foundations are in or will be in, and so so it's really a question of funding to finish.
Yeah, I think it's a really valid point. I think if we wait for SEPTA, I hope I'm wrong, but if we say, hey, SEPTA, we want funding, when will this be available? We might have a parking garage by 2069 or whatever it might be. With that said, I think that's one of the options, right? Do you go back and, maybe that funding is available. I think you're right. Going to SEPTA, Amtrak as part of that evaluation on how do we move forward with this parking garage, right? The question is, what investment are we making and what benefit are we getting? If we have to make no investment, we don't have to worry that much about the benefit, right? If the investment's coming from elsewhere, wonderful. Even if we, benefit very little and it benefits them, that's great. If they say, oh yeah, we can contribute a small portion of it, we can contribute the footing and that's pretty much it, and we're looking to you, Lower Merion Township, to contribute the rest, we better have a pretty big benefit coming out of that if we're investing taxpayer money. So I think that is part of the evaluation, and I think it makes complete sense not to forget about the promise that was made as the project kicked off. Certainly, we'll see where that ends up. But yeah, we should certainly do
One
that.
of the differences from then and now is that Amtrak has significantly more funding as part of federal legislation and federal funding that they didn't have at the time. And so that's, because they were very supportive all along, but they said we have limited funding, but that seems to have changed.
That's a great point.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I have just a couple of clarifications or suggestions. And full disclosure, I'm on this committee. We discussed this memo in advance, and so this shouldn't be happening at this point, but oh well. So I think for optimizing parking, I think, you identified a couple of important things. First is, can people find the parking that's already there? The second is, do we have enough in aggregate? And the third is, I guess, three things. And the third is, does one want to use the location of additional parking as an economic development tool, right? I think there's a fourth one, which is the most efficient use of the parking we have now. Like, so where do we put the long-term parking spot? Are they further away because those people are going to walk into town and stay there for a while? Do you put the short-term parking close to the businesses that where there's going to be more turnover, and just sort of make sure that the parking is that the open spaces are where the open spaces should be, and the fully occupied ones are elsewhere. That's an economic development issue, not a parking issue. And then the second is just a pitch for the last bullet point, which is that the items that you have here, or we have here collectively, as you mentioned, are largely projects, right? And they're generally capital projects, right? And their investments. And I guess one of the questions that I think would be interesting if the committee, if the board wanted the committee to work on, is what on a recurring basis should the economic development function do, right? Like the township used to have someone who helped find tenants for businesses. I'm not sure that's the function we want, but currently economic development comes out of building and planning, and it has a built environment driving economic development. Developing that list of things that the township could do on a recurring basis to have this be part of the normal things that the township checks on to make sure the township is the end of the township is ticking over well. I think would be an interesting project to consider. Anyone else? All right, so we'll go right on to the next committee. That's Building and Planning. It's Commissioner Grimes.
Great, thank you. So, Building and Planning, we've listed 3 priorities, and for those who have been here before, these will look familiar. Let me say at the start, our Building and Planning staff have made significant progress in some, if not all, of these priorities in the last year. They're continue to be listed because they're important, and sort of you don't take your foot off the gas pedal kind of reasoning. So the first one, continuing and proactive enforcement of permit conditions, conditions of approval, and property codes and code enforcement. This is, and Commissioner Bernheim touched on this earlier, this is it's critical that township codes be enforced and be followed by all of our residents, property owners, renters, businesses. It's a safety issue, and also it's an issue of compliance with important development requirements. There's some sense, and there's been a lingering sense for a while, that sometimes someone agrees to do something as a condition of approval on a development project and they neglect to do it. I'm not going to say they forget, but for one reason doesn't always happen, and or that our staff is sometimes more responsive, more reactive. Someone complains that in fact this happens frankly in my world all the time. Someone says, gee, this house has been empty for years and there's all sorts of things happening there, it's falling apart. Can someone come take a look? And Building and Planning, to their credit, come out very promptly, the inspector, and they notice some infractions. Again, I believe that our staff has gotten better with this. We have additional personnel to deal with it, but the need continues, and it is frankly an ongoing need. So that's why it's still listed here. Next one is increasing online access to permits, licenses, conditions of approval, and the historic registry. Comes up in various ways. I have people call me, and I'm sure we all do, who say, gee, is this business licensed? Is there a permit for this kind of work? What is the permit on this house? I'm certain that they're building a multi-family something in this large single-family home. If these things were available online, residents would have more access to it. There are residents and civic associations that like to look at the conditions of approval for a project and make sure they're being complied with. The historic registry we've specifically talked about before, that used to be online. With our migration to the current system that we have for the township's website and systems, it is not online yet. It will be at some point, but that again continues to be important for residents. Not that I think that most of us are very prompt when people ask what conditions are for a particular project, or is this project on the registry, but this makes it easier for instant access, and certainly other governments, usually larger ones, do that. The last thing is historic preservation law update. We are working on that. There is a view shed study that is being completed now that will be that is a preliminary step to looking at our historic code. But the issues remain, particularly many times when a Class 2 project, historic resource, comes before this board. There are commissioners, without mentioning some of them sit to my left, who have noted that Our Class 2 designation does not particularly bring as protection as we might like, and we ought to take a look at that. So this is on here because that remains a priority, and I have received word from our Building and Planning Department that this is coming up this year. And since it remains, if and when it remains a board priority, I would expect that it will. The last thing I will mention that is not on this list, but to me is sort of the, it's not necessarily obvious, but very important, is the redevelopment of the St. Charles Borromeo site. The reason I did not list it, or the committee didn't list it, is because we have a separate ad hoc committee dealing with that. But the St. Charles Borromeo site and the productive reuse by its owner, Mainline Health, I think is important to the township, and certainly it ought to be a board priority in whatever committee to making sure that that redevelopment happens in a beneficial way for our residents and for Mainline Health. So.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Grimes. Questions or thoughts? All right. We now have the Administrative and Human Resources Committee, and that's Commissioner Woodring.
Thank you, President Simon. So in the past, this committee has served solely as an administrative committee. While this will continue, we are proposing at least one committee priority, as well as just highlighting a staff focus for the following year. I'll begin with the staff focus first. The staff will be focusing to continue on implementing annual professional development and training for all staff, for all township staff. And it's important to know that the township has an excellent array of training. The goal here would be to implement training that may have occurred in the past and see what training and educational opportunities may be beneficial to current and future staff. As you may know, as a member of the Delaware Valley Insurance Trust, the township has access to this array of training programs. I was shown it recently myself, and it's a pretty robust system. The township also hosts an in-person organization-wide training on a specific topic each year. Now, this practice was suspended during the COVID pandemic, but will resume this year, and with an anticipated training on harassment in the workplace, so some key training. Now, shifting to the committee priority itself, as you recall, in fall of 2023, the Board of Commissioners approved a study being done for a compensation and classification report. And so the committee's priority that we're proposing would be to evaluate and begin utilizing elements of this compensation and classification report study currently being conducted by the township and its consultant. As most of you may recall, there are two key objectives to this study. The first objective is to re-examine, classify, or clarify and revise job roles and descriptions. During this effort, the township's process of classifying positions would transfer from an analog process to a digital format. This would give the township staff a more efficient way of pulling together materials needed to post open positions, so building in more efficiency to the daily jobs of our administration. The second objective of this study is to compare current job positions and compensation to other comparable municipalities, so that we may be able to see where we stand in these categories. This priority would task the committee itself to evaluate the results of the report, and if necessary, develop policies or strategies to address any inequities that may arise from that. And with that, I can go ahead and open it up for questions.
Okay. Any questions or suggestions? Commissioner Churchill.
Thank you. On this classification project, what is, or do you know the timeline? When is this going to be ready for presentation to us?
So I ran into the podium to answer that. I believe Q3.
We hope to have it this summer. We are well underway. All staff have participated in the questionnaire that assesses their job responsibilities, and now we are in the process of reviewing all those all that data with each of the department heads, and from there it's a matter of collating it and putting it into a finished document. So we're hoping June of this year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Vice President Kramer.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for this for this work. One thing I'd be interested to hear from the committee about at some point would be family leave, a family leave policy for staff.
Commissioner, Vice President Claire, can you speak up?
Yeah, I was saying that I would be interested to see if the committee would be willing to look more at the paid family leave policy, or continue the conversation that we've been having privately, or previously. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you. Okay, thank you, Commissioner Woodring. The next committee is the Ad Hoc Sidewalks Committee. I chair that, so I'll keep talking. So the Ad Hoc Sidewalks Committee was created to evaluate pedestrian improvements, not limited to sidewalks, but pedestrian mobility around the township. And what came forward last year was a proposal to the Board of Commissioners that we commit to the idea that there are spots in the township where it is warranted, it would be warranted for the township to be willing to pay to install sidewalks. Not something the township has generally done. The board supported that with a penciling in spending over 5 years, and then the next question is okay, well then where? Because there are lots of missing sidewalk segments in the township that the staff had previously evaluated, and we discussed them in October. Where the board had left things with this sidewalk committee was that we would circle back with, we had a draft list of the highest priority sidewalks in the township, and we would take that draft list through another round of commissioner feedback and public engagement, and develop something that could be brought to the board so the board can give staff final guidance on what should be the first tranche of sidewalks for the township to develop for the board's consideration. So the sidewalk committee in previous years was the very top priority of the township, and so of this board, and so to a degree, what's on the list is just finishing off the previous year's priority, which is to actually have sidewalks that are kind of ready to be implemented and constructed. So where does that stand? Left over from the previous priority is to gather the commissioner feedback and to do community engagement on where those dollars should be spent. That's for this quarter, this upcoming quarter. And then work on engineering and community engagement to actually implement, try to implement that list. And so let me be clear about what I mean by that priority item. So the idea is that the board comes up with a notional list of where the township should actually invest time and resources to figure out if we could put sidewalks in what we would think would be a priority location. Like everything else that we seem to do, it takes time just to develop something for the board to decide whether to do it. Right? And so the first stage is coming up with a list for the board, for the township to actually investigate. Because it turns out to seriously investigate installing a sidewalk, it's like doing a land development project. You actually have to send the engineers out, figure out what the utilities are that might be dug up underneath it, where are the trees, what's the actual costs, what kind of ADA ramps would you need, really cost it out, and each one would have to be brought to the board individually for its approval. So we need a menu or a task list for the township to sort of get underway on, to develop, and then the board would make a later decision whether to fund each individual project or not. That would also give opportunity on a sidewalk by sidewalk basis for the public to have full public engagement. That is, no one's going to wake up and discover that there are backhoes on their street digging up spots for a sidewalk that they had no idea about. It would all be communicated with full public engagement in advance. So really the first priority for the committee for this year is to, the township's budget has budgeted money for engineering and this sort of investigatory stage for an initial tranche of sidewalks to actually do that, so we are ready with hopefully some sidewalks to be shoveled in the ground in 2025. So that'd be the first priority. And then the second is an additional item that we sort of discovered that we needed, and I'll just say ad hoc committees are supposed to do their task and then cease to exist. And I was hoping that we would cease to exist, but it turns out there's more to do. And that is, what about all the places that residents of a street say, well, we would like a sidewalk, but it hadn't percolated up to the top of the township saying, this is like where we are going to put our, the finite dollars we have first, right? What do you do with those? And we've always said, oh, well, if people want a sidewalk, they can install one, which is true. You can always put a sidewalk in front of your house, right? And you could always, your neighbor could put a sidewalk in front of their houses, and if 10 neighbors in a row did it, you'd actually have a sidewalk segment. But like, how do you get everyone organized, and does the township have a policy around it to help facilitate like a street wanting to do something that's in their collective interest? And we don't really, and so coming up with something to help us answer the question when someone comes to us and says, hey, we want a sidewalk on the street, we're not asking the township to pay for it. Like, how do we do that? Just like we do with a traffic calming policy. When people want traffic calming on the street, we actually have a policy for how you do it and how we evaluate it. We don't have that for sidewalks, and that's what that last item that we proposed to be on the priority list would be. Any questions or suggestions? Commissioner Churchill.
With the school district extending their walk zone, I'm not quite sure how that is going to affect our, sidewalk policy, but.
Excellent question. Excellent question. So I think there are two moving pieces. I think one is, the school district is, you said they were going to extend their walk zone, and then said, well, we were actually sort of looking into what this is going to mean and what it's actually going to be. And so it is not nailed down yet. And so, the board has, the committee, generally thinks that we should at least keep moving on our stuff and not wait for the school district to figure out exactly what it is that it's doing. The second is that, we have the opportunity to refine our short list right now. And I think, the looking into, taking a close look at some of the areas that would be that the initial expanded walk zone would have encompassed, like surface some things, right? And I think there may be some segments that show up that we had not previously considered. And it gets reshuffled a bit, and we have public engagement to sort of help us do this. And I think this is the right time to consider those things. Commissioner Zoll.
President Sinai, the top priority list is some 15 sidewalk sections.
Yeah.
Do you envision, or maybe I should just say, how do you envision staff approaching that? Because based on what you've just explained and what we talked about previously, 15 sounds like a lot for staff to pursue all at once, given that each one is essentially a land development plan. And the scope of work involved in each one. So do you envision it becoming a group of 5 and then another group of 5 later, or how do you envision that?
Yeah, so for the implementation of that top priority list, so great point. So the draft top priority list that was circulated in October had 14 segments on it. We have one staff member in Parks and Rec who appears to be doing 17 projects. So it appears we can do this. But less glibly, the board allocated money over a 5-year horizon towards this, with the idea that we weren't quite sure how long things would take, and 5 years was a goal to get this done in. And I think if the board supports this, we will find out a lot along the way, right, about how long things take and how quickly we can move through them. And we have the opportunity to do it as fast as we can, given our allocation. It's a dollars constraint that's constrained to timing. It's the board's allocation of the CIP. You could do 7 really small ones perhaps if the staff could do it. In terms of prioritizing them, the board previously said we were going to come up with a list of the ones that are sort of in the top set, the top tranche of priorities, and leave it to staff to sort of optimally figure out the timing to bring them forward. You can imagine some projects that involve dozens of houses and dozens of residents in a complicated street could be years and years and years to get done. It's complicated. And some might be one block with 4 houses, and it's just connecting things, and it's relatively easy, you can do it quickly. And I think that, you know, we previously said we're going to leave it to staff to sort of like, you know, they can walk and chew gum at the same time, so they can be working on some of the longer horizon, takes, you know, more legwork kind of projects at the same time as moving forward some of the quicker ones. And do it that way. But we'll see. I mean, Levering Mill took 5 years, right? Something like that. So we will see.
You said it's all about the money, but don't you think there's also the management component of how this process would unfold?
Yeah, I think I said also subject to staff bandwidth. So, okay.
Very good. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Commissioner Bernhardt.
Yeah, and without getting, you know, too far into this, but similar to the comments of Commissioner Zeloff, and I don't know all the roads that are out there like the back of my hand, but I do know the second one that's listed, and I'm just going to use that as an example of Hagees Ford Road from Penn Valley Elementary School to Welsh Valley. I've attended no less than half dozen, maybe closer to a dozen meetings in connection with that. And I remember one where the gentleman who was in the seat occupied to your right was manager, you know, Cleveland. So, right, yeah. And we had about 100+ people there. And one of the problems on that roadway is the topography makes it almost impossible. Yep. In order to go ahead and do that. Between the large trees that are there, some of the slopes that drop down through the area. And Chris Leswing came up with a great idea of trying to make a walkway through part of it where people are actually on the street. And I only use that as an example in that that's 1.7 million of that initial top 10. And as much as it would be great to have sidewalk from Penn Valley Elementary to Welsh Valley, it's not happening. It is just not feasible to do that given the properties and the number of property owners that don't want it far exceed, on that walkway, far exceed those that do. Dial back 10 years, I went door to door. So, you know, in order to see were people even interested, let alone all the difficulties with that. So I bring that up in a little bit longer-winded way than I intended, but to say that part of the process of saying, all right, list them and then go out to the engineers, before we start spending that money on those, we need to do that internal analysis on each of these. All right, is this even possible before we do it? And then focus on those that, as you just indicated, maybe the easier ones that are going to provide, you know, walkways that are still priorities. It'd be great to do that one, but you can already cross it off the list because it's just not going to work.
Okay. So thank you for those comments. So it's helpful to clarify some of what's on here, right? So what we're asking the board to our commissioners to prioritize is the refining that final list, right? So we can move forward. And so I think you've expressed that you're dubious about the second item on the list. 10 years ago, I think the board was not in favor of red light cameras, and they are now. So, people on that street may have evolved over those 10 years, or changed over those 10 years.
No, some are in favor of red light.
But the point being that the times change, right? And so, like, taking a fresh look at it, even if it turns out not to be feasible. Like, you have to look. That's the only way you know.
Right.
And
okay.
if it's not, you move on. And there's 86 other sidewalks on that list that you could go to. And the other thing I will say, just because there may be people watching, everything that has gone through has already gone through an engineering screen about a rough screen about feasibility. Doesn't mean that the resident sentiment's in favor. That's kind of up to the board commissioner. But that's why that number is so big.
Then I'd like to see that one, because I know the area extraordinarily well. You've got drop-offs that are like this dais that's there, and then you're sitting there with these huge, huge trees. So I'm not quite sure that works. And my point was that internally we need to do the evaluation before we send it out externally and start spending, money on projects that aren't going to work. So that being within my ward, and also spills over to, Ward 3? Yeah. We'd be able to take a look at that, and then maybe each of the ward commissioners who are going to be more familiar with their areas could say, all right, this one may work, may not work, but, you know, no one's ever going to state, don't take a second look at something, but let's make sure we're being practical.
Yeah, point well taken.
Enough said.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, good. The remaining committee is the Ad hoc Affordable Housing Committee, and that is Commissioner Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Affordable Housing Committee, two priorities that I will discuss is, I must say, is not resemblance of the work that has gone into and the discussions of this committee. I would like to thank our members of the committee, Commissioners Kramer and Kramer, and Commissioner Zoloff, and the members of the administration and staff who've consistently been a part of these conversations. What is here is a diluted version of what these discussions have been. They're complex discussions, they're ongoing discussions, and I would ask that the president at some point allow this committee to bring a committee meeting forward to the full board to have a more thorough discussion about these issues, so we can have a more clarity for ourselves and the community about the work that has gone into this and the work that needs to be done. Having said that, before you are the two priorities that were selected to be shared. The first is the continued pursuit of the Ardmore House expansion project that is an ongoing piece. And the second is to conduct the housing analysis to inform future affordable housing opportunities and policy considerations, including accessory dwelling units. Mr. President, if you allow me to use my chairman's prerogative to make an additional statement on this. Today is April 3rd, which is insignificant to a lot of people, but it's a very important day for me. Because in 1968, Martin Luther King attended Temple Church of God in Christ this time of night, rainy like this. And it was the last sermon that he said before he was assassinated the next day. During that meeting, one of the things that he talked about is issues of racism, issues of fair housing, and economic diversity. And I would have to say that I'm saddened that 56 years later, that our colleague, Commissioner Gavin, has to speak on behalf of our board to denounce hate in our community. And that 56 years later, we are still talking about the need for affordable housing. I would hope that we don't have to wait 56 years for both of these things to be eradicated. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevenson. And whenever your committee wants to bring something forward to the full board, we will certainly make a spot on the agenda for you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions or suggestions? Commissioner Turco.
Thank you. I know we had talked about title entanglements in previous years, and I don't know if it ever got enough traction for us to pursue that this year.
So there's a couple things that, yes, there was a need for those pieces. The issue with tangled entitlements a lot of times happens is that they're unknown what those needs are. There have been a lot of contributions from individuals. The township has made connections for individuals, and they still do have. If someone comes forth and have an issue, that we make those connections with the appropriate people who are either legal or other support. What the township did not want to do is become the caretaker of those particular things, because not only for the legal implications that it may cause.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or suggestions for Commissioner Stevenson? Okay. Seeing none, we have one last item, which is a recognition that not all potential priorities may slot neatly into a committee. So we have the opportunity, if any commissioner wants to raise something that didn't fit in a committee, as something the board should consider. Okay. Well, thank you to all my colleagues for a really productive and illuminating evening. This has been terrific. You can look forward to a, what is it, a survey, a scoring sheet, to be circulated later. And have a good evening, everyone.